Thank you so much for taking the time to join me this afternoon. When all of this stuff started several weeks ago now, and it became apparent that our normal way of operating and doing things, they simply, unfortunately, weren't going to be an option for a pretty good while. And there were two basic things that I wanted to, in some way, assist in accomplishing. Two things that I knew. That were going to be hard on me and that I was going to specifically need. Number one, I wanted to do whatever we could to help people stay connected to the Word of God. And then number two, I wanted to find ways for us, however possible, to try to stay connected to one another. Now I don't know that I had ever used the phrase social distancing before all of this happened. But that's become a phrase that's common really to our vernacular now, unfortunately. So with this pandemic, the first really of anything of its kind for, I think, nearly all of us in our lifetimes, we've been able, fortunately, through virtual means, we've studied together, we've prayed together in kind of an odd way, and a big shout out to all of our song leaders being willing to do it. We've even sang together, and now as a congregation, we're able to come into the parking lot and in our cars and be together. And those certainly are wonderful things. And we should no doubt, we should be thankful for those things. So staying connected to the Word, while an individual responsibility as brethren, we've been able to help one another with that. But what has been really, really difficult, I think, has been overcoming this social distancing barrier. And I'll tell you what I've really missed, and I've talked to so many of you, and I know you share this with me. I miss our times together. I miss being together in our homes. I miss being together in restaurants with one another. Our times together, how about this? Our times together just before and after our services. I miss those hugs. I miss just the small talk that those opportunities afford us. So I've had this idea for a couple of months now. What if every so often I had a conversation with different members of our Kenwood family? Over the years, I have learned so much about our family at Kenwood that not everybody knows. And God has blessed us so richly in the last so many years. And we have so many new members, people that didn't grow up together at Kenwood. And while that's a great blessing in many ways, it does produce sometimes some challenges because we just don't maybe know each other as well. And right now we just can't get together and get to know each other better. So I thought, is there a way, using technology, using our resources, ultimately what I want to do with this, to allow some of our older members to share and to teach some of us that are younger? That's a biblical principle. So as we begin this morning, and I'm going to bring in our honored guest here in just a minute, I want to read a passage to you from Titus chapter 2 at verse 1. Titus chapter 2 at verse 1, the Apostle Paul says this: "But as for you, speak the things which are fitting for sound doctrine. Older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, in perseverance. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. Likewise, urge the young men to be sensible. In all things, show yourself to be an example of good deeds, with purity in doctrine, dignified, sound in speech, which is beyond reproach, so that the opponent will be put to shame, having nothing bad to say about us." I love that passage. Older men urge or teach the younger men. Older women, likewise, you teach the younger women. I have been blessed in my lifetime throughout every stage of my life as I think about it. God has blessed me with strong, godly examples, people that I can look up to, and two people that Kylie and I know countless others look up to. That's Sandy and Wallace Bowman. I asked Sandy and Wallace to join me this afternoon, and I just want really to pick their brain. They have meant so much to me and the rest of us, my family, over the last so many years, and they are wonderful, godly examples. And I think those of us who are younger, we can learn so much from men and women like Wallace and Sandy. So Sandy and Wallace, I want to thank you for being willing to do this. I know this is a bit out of your comfort zone, and the idea of being the center of attention for a few minutes at least. I know, Wallace, that is certainly not something that you're probably real excited about, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I know that you both see the value in sharing some of your experiences, sharing some of your wisdom with those of us who are younger and really do look up to you. So thank you all. So you guys doing okay today?
We're fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. So before we get into some of our questions, Sandy, I want to share an experience with the congregation, and I think that I have shared this probably from the pulpit before, but I want to bring it up again because this really begins my relationship with you two, and you may not even realize how big of a role you played in me ultimately coming and working at Kenwood. Can you believe that this June will be 6 years
Wow.
I've been with the Kenwood congregation? You know, when I first came over and filled in, that's just what it was. It was just I think that was in October. I began filling in and had no idea that a vacancy, a preaching vacancy, was on the horizon. I don't know if the elders knew. I don't even know if Jonathan knew at that point. From my standpoint, I was just coming over to fill in. And you know, congregations, they go through stages, and through no fault of anybody. You know, sometimes congregations, like I said, they go through ebbs and flows, and we certainly know numbers don't always tell the whole story. But here I was, a fairly young guy, and Caroline at the time was not even one yet. Anderson was just about, I think he was 3, possibly. And at the time, there weren't any children at Kenwood. Now we're blessed. We've got a whole quiver full of kids, and God has certainly, He has certainly blessed us with. And one of the things that I just figured when I came over to preach for Kenwood, and then the conversations began, you know, the possibility, Justin, would you ever have any interest coming and doing this full time? Well, I loved my job, and you know, when you're a young family and you have 2 kids and you're at a congregation that doesn't have any kids, well, you know, who will teach Bible class? Will they be in Bible class with anybody? So I suspected when we first started visiting at Kenwood that the kids would just be in the adult class with us. Well, unbeknownst to me, Sandy, you took it upon yourself, and in the beginning, I don't know if you remember this, but you took Anderson back there and you had class with him. And it wasn't long after that that Erica and her children began to come and visit. And not only did you just take Anderson, you took Evie, you took Xavier, you took Maddox, and you had Bible class with them. You took them outside and you talked about God and creation. And Anderson still remembers this. And you know, at that time in my life, I loved my job in education. I had no plans of making a change, and no plans leaving the church where I had grown up and the people that I loved. And I was praying to God, make this black and white for me. Make this clear. What should I do? I want to preach. I want to serve, but is this the right place? Is this the right fit? And I believe with all of my heart that God made my decision black and white. The minute that you had that Bible class prepared for them, because I tell you, I've thought a lot about this. And there were a lot of acts of kindness. There were a lot of things that convinced me that Kenwood really was a special place with so much potential. But what you did for my children represented to me the spirit of Kenwood largely. And it tipped the scales for me. And so I will always be appreciative, because when I look back, I am just so thankful that God brought me to Kenwood and that I'm a part of this great family at Kenwood. So I wanted to share that with you and with the rest of the congregation who may not have ever heard that. But I really appreciate that, Sandy.
Thank you.
Really
We're glad you came to Kenwood also.
I appreciate that. So Wallace, I want to start with you. You've shared some things over the years with me. I know you come from a rather large family. Tell me a little bit about where you're from.
Okay, I've got it wrote down here.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm from Monroe, Barron County. I lived out of Glasgow, Kentucky. We moved a lot of places as my dad raised watermelons and crops on people's farms. A portion of the crops went to them. We were poor but rich in the family. My dad was a quiet person, but never spanked us, but corrected us. I was raised at different times as of today. They taught us to go to church. We had to walk, even though we didn't get to go all the time, but his church wasn't close by. Even though I lost my mom when I was 11 years old, she died of cancer at 49. I can remember her reading the big family Bible all the way through, she told me. Today, when bad times come, I think of mom and dad, what they went through. He lost 2 wives of sickness with kids left. It left him to raise the kids. Story told before I was born, he lost 2 sons, a baby and a 12-year-old boy. He had 2 houses to burn down in his life, but kept faith up and never heard him to complain. You learn from your parents and walk in their footsteps, as people say. I had a good mom and dad, 14 brothers and sisters, even though the older ones had moved on, as remember in my life, as I was one of the youngest. 5 of us are still living. We are blessed.
Wallace, did you say 14 brothers and sisters?
Yeah, 14 brothers and sisters. When my dad lost his first wife at 21, he had 2 kids. Then my mother, she lost her husband and she had 1 kid. So they married and they had 3 kids. And then 11 more came under my mother. And of course they lost a 12-year-old older brother, which I never knew, but it was before I was born.
That's a lot of loss, Wallace, for your father.
Yeah, he never complained.
That's unbelievable. The things that
I saw that he never complained.
Yeah. So your mild and gentle, quiet manner, that comes from your dad.
Yes.
I guess we do. We walk in their footsteps.
Yeah, how about that? Well, I have told you before, Wallace, that we need more men. There's a lot of us loud men who can get up and string a few words together. But that quiet, gentle, calm spirit, Wallace, I don't think that I've ever encountered you when you weren't exactly the same. I've never caught you at church in a bad mood, and I'm not naive enough to think that you don't have bad moments. But you've always been kind and you've always been gentle, and there's a humility about you that is worthy of imitation. And I know your wife sitting there next to you, I know how much she respects that about you. So, man, that's a lot of, but where did you say you were from originally, Wallace?
From Monroe County and Barron County. That's we usually lived between Glasgow and Tompkinsville.
Yeah.
Of course, we moved all the time because my dad, raised watermelons, and he never would raise them on one land. He always wanted to raise them on a different land.
Wow.
But we never had a car. We borrowed horses, and he plowed the fields. I remember one time he plowed the field with a broken leg. And I can still see that picture of him plowing the field.
So I want all of us to remember that Sunday morning when we're sitting in the parking lot worshiping God and we get a little hot. Let's not complain.
Right.
So
And I'm
Sandy,
not,
what about you? Tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I was born in Rockport, Kentucky, and we moved to Louisville when I was 4 years old. We lived in the Shively area. Family was my dad, mom, 2 brothers, one older and one younger. My dad was a hard worker, plus raised a big garden. We always had plenty to eat. Mom was a homemaker, cooking, sewing, quilting, and was always busy. She was a faithful Christian with parents faithful, always took us to church even though she never drove. Dad took us sometimes, but we rode a bus or had Christian families to pick us up. Mom's parents were faithful. Some of her siblings were too. I looked up to them as examples.
Sandy, I know over the years I've gotten to know some of your family and I know your brothers, and I know how much they adore you. And I had the great honor of speaking at your mother's funeral. And I remember hearing you all over at the house that time talking about getting rides to churches, sometimes getting rides to church, sometimes taking the bus because your mom didn't drive, but other times brethren picking you up. I know how special the relationship between brothers and sisters are in Christ to you and Wallace. Talk a little bit about brethren picking you up and your mom, no matter what, even though she didn't drive, getting you to church. What do you think that instilled in you?
The determination to be able to go to church at every opportunity. We had a family. There was a mother and a father and 2 daughters that picked us up, and we had to sit on each other's laps in the car in order to fit in the car. But they were willing to pick us up, and my older brother ended up marrying one of those girls.
How about that? How about that? But it made an influence. I mean, I'm sure it made an impression on you early on as far as responsibility that brothers and sisters in Christ have to one another.
Right.
Yeah, being there for one another. And I know that you all were always steadfast since I've been at Kenwood, and used to pick Helen up and take her to church, and that's a wonderful thing. So Wallace, tell me this. You talked about the influence, even from a young age, that your mother reading the scripture to you and your dad doing his best. Y'all went to church the best you could, as it afforded you, just by way of geography and everything. Sometimes made it difficult. Tell me about your journey as far as coming to a knowledge of the truth and ultimately obeying the gospel. At what point in your life did that come?
how I come to learn the truth and obey the gospel. It was in the summer school break in the country. I would come to Louisville and visit my older brother, and went to Central Church of Christ, where I learned I should become a Christian. My brother, he said a word to me one time. He says, "You go to church as much as a Christian," which got me thinking, which I thought about and knew I know what to do. So I obeyed the gospel at Central Church of Christ, went back to the country to finish my high school, came back to Louisville, got a job, and back to Central Church of Christ. And later, me and my brother went to Shively, so I would go with that. Later, came to Shively, and that's where I met.
I was gonna say, yeah, how about that? Okay, all right, we're going to get to that in just a minute. I didn't know that, Wallace. So that's really interesting. So you were up here visiting your brother, going to church with him, and while you visit, and you obeyed the gospel then. How old were you?
How old were you?
Oh, how old was I? I was in the. I think I was a freshman in high school.
Freshman in high school.
Freshman. I visited up in the summertime with him, and I learned more the church we went to down there, we didn't have a preacher, and it was a small church, and I was just learning. And sometimes we would go to the Baptist church, and then so it got me studying.
Right.
And but I've really learned the truth of Central Church of Christ by coming up in the summertime. Just
Yeah. How about that? That's a great story. I had no idea. Sandy, what about you? I think I probably know how this one goes, but how did you come to know the truth? And I'm sure your mother played a huge role in that, obviously.
Okay, as a little girl, we attended West End Church of Christ, and we went to Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and so forth. And I was 12 when I was baptized for sin and wanted to go to heaven.
Yeah.
I knew that Jesus was the Son of God.
How about that? So, Wallace, you alluded to this a moment ago. So you come to Louisville, you find your way over to Shively, and there happens to be this beautiful young girl that just happens to attend the Shively congregation. I'm assuming is how this went. So take us through that. So how did what we have now, because there is no Wallace without Sandy, and there is no Sandy without Wallace. So how did all of this come to be? And I'll open this up to both of you.
I guess the first time I saw Sandy, that was before Shively was built, and they worshipped in a school building on Rockford Lane. And I remember seeing her there. I hadn't wrote down here, but I remember this girl had an orange dress and a white purse and white shoes and blonde hair. But I would keep visiting Shively with my brother. That's how I met her. So we dated just for 6 months, got married. And now we've been married for 55 years. So I would advise someone to in the church to live by the Bible, communicate to each other, work out bad times, never go to sleep mad. Usually the 3 words, I love you often, and work together and help each other.
No, I love that. All right, Sandy, I want your perspective. Now, he told me what he saw. What did you see?
Okay. My
Be
family.
be very sweet to him now.
Oh, I have to be.
I know.
My family attended Shively Church of Christ. Wallace was from Tompkinsville, Glasgow area, came to spend the summer with his brother Garnet and their family. So we met at Shively, and there was a get-together for the teenagers with a cookout, played croquet, and of course, I flirted with Wallace, and I think he flirted back a little.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
And several years later, we met again, dated and married within 6 months, October the 30th of 1965. Realizing later, every anniversary, taking kids trick-or-treating. Young people think about that when setting a date, because you're going to be tied up with trick-or-treating every year.
That's right.
We will be married 55 years in October. 55 good years.
55 good years. Sandy, I don't remember when it was. It's been probably, I don't know, a few months ago. And I had mentioned, for some reason, Wallace had come up in one of my sermons. And I mentioned kind of what I said earlier about him. Just, I think the best way of describing Wallace is he's a gentleman. And,
yes, he is.
We were talking out in the parking lot, and I was afraid that I had embarrassed him, that I had gone a little too far, and I thought maybe he had gotten a little upset with me. And so I was talking to you a little bit about it. Wallace, I think that you had gone outside for some reason to check on something outside. There was something that made me think, oh no, I've embarrassed him, and he's upset with me, and because I've gone too far in the pulpit before. And you and we talked in the parking lot, and he was a little bit distance away. This was before social distancing, but he was distanced a little away from us. And I told Kylie on the way home, I said, I don't know how long they've been married, but I suspect it's been a good while. And when she talks about him, when she talks about Wallace, she lights up. Even after all these years, you light up when you talk about Wallace. And I think
Yes,
it's
that's because he's the love of my life.
yeah.
Same here.
55 years. Wallace, I want you to go back to a few of those things that you brought up a second ago. As far as, we've got a lot of young families at Kenwood. We have a lot of people in that demographic. And, I'm sure over the years that every day has not been easy. And I'm sure in your marriage and in your family, there's been good times, there's been hard times, there's been gains, there's been losses, there's been disappointment. What would you say for those of us who are younger? We've even got some, I think about Ethan and Cheney, who are going to be married. Morgan and Cody were just married. What advice would you give to us? What would you attribute to not just being married 55 years, but still lighting up when you talk about each other? What do you attribute that to? Because I think we would all agree. I don't think that's the norm, unfortunately.
Well, as you get older, life seems so short. And really, the 55 years, it don't seem like 55 years.
Yeah.
And you want to go on more years.
Yeah.
And always trust each other. And yeah, like you said, you have hard times, and we're like anybody else. We're not perfect, but you always communicate. And I've always told, even when my kids got married, never go to sleep mad.
Yeah.
You make it up for that day. Don't go to bed mad or nothing. Work it out.
Talk to each other.
Talk to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Sandy, what do you think?
You might not disagree on everything, but you work it out, and then for the best for your kids and for
Right. Sandy, what would you say? What would you attribute y'all's success to?
Love. You have to love one another, talk to each other, be best friends, and always trust the other person.
Yeah. And God's always been the center of y'all's home. I know that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where the love and that's where the trust ultimately comes from. So you guys, you meet in 6 months, he's the guy. So you all are married. And then God, over the span of so many years, he blesses you with 3 daughters. And I know that every single day raising 3 daughters, Wallace, I know that was just easy and there were no challenges to that and everything was just perfect. Well, here's what I do know. I know that all 3 of your daughters, and I know they would be the first ones to say that, just as you all said, and it goes without saying, nobody is perfect, but every single one of them, they're faithful Christians, and they're married to faithful Christians. And your family is full. Your grand kids are faithful Christians, and those who are of age, they're married to faithful Christians. And there's just this chain. There's just this legacy of faithfulness. As someone who is raising 3 children of my own, what advice would you give to those of us who are younger you remember this stage? What advice would you give young parents as far as raising our children?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know we have 3 daughters and 3 son-in-laws, and then even the grandkids and all their mates are in the church. And I've always been so blessed. But this is a question we have asked ourselves many times. How did we do it? How were we so blessed? Hope we were an example to them growing up, teaching them what's wrong and what is right, just like my dad and mom. If I could go back, I would have liked a day job, as I worked mostly midnights and second shift, and was thankful to work, but Sandy was home with the girls. She did most of the discipline. As girls say today, the look I gave them when correcting them hurt me more than spanking, them. Never show anger in front of the kids. Show them love every day and put church first. Pray to God always to lead you children in their future lives, even as they grow up. You still pray for your kids.
Yeah.
We have been through hard times, spiritual. We have been through hard times, physical, but work through it. God does answer prayers. Prayer means a lot.
Right.
And keep praying.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. Teaching our children to pray, praying with them. Your fruit speaks for itself. There's no doubt about that. And I know, and you all guys would be the first to recognize, children, they grow up and they have free will and they make their own choices, but the lessons that were instilled in them. And one of the things that I have noticed, of course, I don't know Valerie real well. I've been around her a few times, but being around Kim and being around Melissa, it becomes rather obvious to me, and really all the grandkids, for that matter, how much they respect you all, how much they look up to you, and that really is a wonderful thing, because they know you, and they know what you're all about, and I think that's a really, really special thing. When your children look up to you and your children respect you, and ultimately they want to be like you and imitate you. So Wallace, you weren't the spanker, huh?
No.
What'd you say?
You weren't the spanker.
No, three little girls, it's hard to spank them.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm far harder on Anderson than I am Caroline.
I think
Annabelle will probably be worse.
I think talking to your kids is a good thing. Talk to them in a good way. And as they said, I always said, now don't you do that no more.
But they never wanted to disappoint you though, Wallace. That was important to them as well. And that comes back to the love and the respect that they had for not only you, but for both of you. That's similar to my experience growing up. Dad was, he was more, I used to tell Dad, I say, I would much rather get a spanking from you, Dad, than you look at me in that look and just know that I've disappointed you. I'd rather just take the spanking. Mom was probably more of the mom was more of the disciplinarian. But you brought up something else, Wallace. You said church was first in y'all's house.
Church was first in our house.
God came first.
Yeah, God came first. We would always went to the Bible study all the time.
Sandy, how important do you think the consistency of that is, instilling that in our children from a young age, that God comes first, and when God's people assemble, we're going to be there no matter what? How important do you think that is for us as young parents to instill that in our children, even at a young age when we may not even think that they're completely getting it possibly?
Well, they're watching very close, and we are an example to them. They watch every move you make, and they put that in their own life as they grow up. And it's always very important, we always tried to take them to church, Sunday school, and so forth, and always tried to have lessons done. We tried to live by the Bible the best we could and be faithful. We weren't perfect by any means, but tried our best. Melissa converted Ray, and they had Zach and Shelby, and Kim and Joe married. Kim had Miranda, and they had Alex together. Valerie had Dylan and married Heath, and together they had Summer and Autumn. Almost 55 years later, we are a family of 23.
Wow.
Sometimes we say, how did that happen?
And you all are one of the closest extended families that I have maybe ever been associated with. You guys are very intentional about making sure that you get together for birthdays, making sure that you're together for the holidays, spending time together, being a part of your lives. And Sandy, if I'm not mistaken, you've done a little babysitting, and Wallace, you as well. Y'all have done a little babysitting over the years.
We've done a lot of babysitting. Ever since we've had grandchildren, they've never gone to daycare. We've always kept them. Of course, I probably did the most of it, and they can tell you some funny tales, but anyway, and then when the great-grandchildren came along, we've even watched them. And Melissa has followed in my footsteps, doing the home daycare with the grandchildren, and Wallace and I take turns going over to help her.
Right.
So we're always willing to help wherever we can help.
Right. Just a loving family.
Yes,
being there for
we
one
are.
another. Yeah. Well, it's special to watch, and it's certainly something that I think the rest of us, it's a wonderful example for all of us. Just the love that you have for one another, the respect that you have for one another, and even like you said, with the great grandchildren, the way that they light up. When Nanny and Poppy walk in the room, I see it even when you all walk into church, and building relationships like that and having relationships with the people we love. Those things take work. They don't just happen. And you guys are certainly wonderful examples of that. I asked you beforehand, what's your, and this is a little bit of a change of subject, kind of, as far as, we all understand that, life, we're going through an experience right now that I don't think any of us were prepared for, and I don't think any of us could have imagined the challenges that this virus would bring. I never thought I would see the day to where we would have to be in a situation where we couldn't assemble. I just can't get my mind wrapped around that this virus put us in that position. So I don't think any of us were prepared for that, but it's a reminder that, life happens and things come upon us, and God allows us to be tested. And so there's ups and there's downs. And one of the things in those situations are there's certain passages, there's certain parts of the Bible that we cling to in those times, that we go back to, that keeps us grounded, keeps us centered. Do you guys, Wallace, I'll start with you. Do you have a favorite Bible verse that's been just instrumental in your life or means special to you for whatever reason?
Yeah, got me thinking. I went through my Bible, have a lot of verses underlined, they're all special. But I kept coming back to this verse right here, that on the 2 John, the 9th verse, whoever transgresses and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ has not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he has both the Father and the Son.
Yeah.
So you just can't, you got to believe the whole Bible, not just one verse. And
yeah. And Wallace, we all have, there's so much division, and in the religious world, there's a lack of unity. And if we all had the appreciation for the truth and for the word and standing on those principles, as you and Sandy have all of those years, we as God's people, we could be united. That's a fabulous verse. What about you, Miss Sandy?
Okay. My favorite verse, and it's hard to pick just one. There are so many, but I picked Mark 8:36. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose or forfeit his soul? We can want all material things in this world, but that won't take or help us get to heaven. We can have plenty or be rich and use it for good. We've never seen anyone take anything with them to the grave.
That's right. You're exactly right. Boy, if we could get that, if we could just come to truly accept that and make, the treasure of our heart, make that heaven, and understand that all this other stuff, at the end of the day, it's not going to mean a hill of beans, is it?
Right.
If it's heaven, we've missed everything. And as I say sometimes, if we miss heaven, hell is all there is. And That's just an unacceptable option, isn't it? Absolutely. So this is my last question that I'm going to pose to you. And this one is I think it's a really good question, but I think it's possibly, how do you answer, a question like this completely? Because I got to thinking, I was like, man, if they would have asked me that, that's a really tough one to answer, but we'll try it anyway. So how long have you all, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, and if you don't know the exact number, how long have you all been members at Kenwood? Do you know?
We came to Kenwood about 32 years ago. We go by our oldest grandson.
Yeah.
He was born in Germany then. We was at Kenwood, so that's 32 years ago. And of course, the Kenwood welcomed us with open arms back then. And then even to this day, it's still that way. As a Kenwood family, I've always saw love, forgiveness, and truth in the scriptures and helping each other.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. 32 years. That's a pretty good amount of time. And over the years, you've shared your life with the brethren there, and no doubt there's been highs and lows. You've wept together, you've rejoiced together. And it sounds to me, Wallace, that the brethren have meant a whole lot to you over the years.
Yes, they have. And so many, think back over the years, so many people has passed on. It's such examples to you.
Right.
That's
Sandy, let me ask you, Sandy, what have the brethren at Kenwood meant to you over the years?
Okay, we've been at Kenwood about 32 years, and we love every one of our church family. I can't imagine not having our brothers and sisters in Christ. We've gone to many get-togethers to know them, getting to know them, and if we need anything, we can ask for help, and also we're here if anyone needs us. We were in a car accident in 1978, and I had several injuries. After one hip replacement, my grandmother died. The funeral was in Central City, and I could not go. So Madge Hart came and spent the day with me. Many came and brought food, and while in the hospital, Nancy Martin spent a night with me there. And she can tell you some funny stories if you're interested. And when we're struggling, brothers and sisters come to help. I don't know how people make it without our church family. Love them all. They are a true blessing.
I could not agree with you more. They have certainly been a blessing to me, just as you guys have been such a blessing to me and to my family. And Nancy or Sandy, Ralph posted on Facebook. I guess over the last couple of weeks, he's been giving us kind of updates as far as the attendance and the contribution, and thanking everybody that have come and participated in our worship in the parking lot. It still sounds so funny to say. At least once, maybe you've said it twice, and it really struck me. You have written in the response, "Proud of my Kenwood family." What do you mean?
I am.
What do you mean by that?
Well, how they all stick together. We look after one another. We want to help each one of us go to heaven and love each other. And it just, the Kenwood family is just so special.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being willing to do this. Going first is always a hard thing because you don't know exactly what you're getting into. But I can't think of a better example that you and Wallace have set for all of us by way of your love for God, by way of your love for one another, by way of your love for family, by way of your love for your brethren at Kenwood, We are so, and I know I speak for the entire congregation. We are so thankful for you all, so thankful for your example, and we just, we love and adore you.
Well, the same to you and everyone again with it.
Thank you so much for allowing me to do this. And to everybody viewing this, you may be next. So look out. But a special thanks certainly to Sandy and Wallace. Thank you so much, guys, and we love you, and we'll be talking to you soon, okay?
Wallace
Love
has a
you too.
couple of comments,
I would love that.
follow
Okay.
up, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Oh, I just wrote down there, I said, sometimes we look at someone and say their life is perfect. That's not so.
Yeah.
We don't want to be bragging. We're just blessed. We're just as human as anyone else. We sin like all. We have hard times and good times like all. We've been through hard times like even my dad. Think about how many family members we lost, and lost my dad when I was in the service in Germany. And of course, Sandy mentioned the car accident. I had cancer 2 times that God had got me through with that. I lost jobs, got another job. But God sees us through. When you get my age, 79, you can look back on life and see how God answered your prayers. Even this virus we're going through now, we'll see how God got us through it and learn by it. Maybe a more thankful person.
Absolutely. What a perfect way to end this. I love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you too.
And
Love you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Bye.
great day.